Hi, welcome back. This is the first of my videos on Aeneid 6 for the set text prescription 23 to 24. I'm going to go through the Latin, the English and the effects you need for the paper. Here begins the road that leads to the rolling waters of Acheron, the river of Tartarus. Here is a vast quagmire of boiling whirlpools which belches sand and slime into Cocytus. And these are the rivers and waters guarded by the terrible Charon in his filthy rags. On his chin there grows a thick beard, never trimmed. His glaring eyes are lit with fire and a foul cloak hangs from a knot at his shoulder. So there's quite a lot of vocab. Hinc via, this route. We've got vastaque voragine gurges, the boiling quagmire and whirlpools. We've got terribili squalore, so these are all kind of root words in English, terrible and squalor, so plenty that you know. With his own hands he plies the pole and sees to the sails as he ferries the dead in a boat the colour of iron. He is no longer young, but being a god, enjoys a rude strength and a green old age. The whole throng of the dead was rushing to his part of the riverbank. Mothers, men, great-hearted heroes whose lives were ended, boys, unmarried girls, and young men laid on the pyre before the faces of their parents. So we're starting with the image of Charon moving through the underworld to present an image of kind of dread. If we look at the vocabulary, you can see corpora for bodies, senior or man, deo for god, and senectus is old age, so all quite intuitive from the language paper. Matres atque viri, mothers and men. Corpora defunctaque vita, so bodies devoid of life. Magnanimum heroum, great-hearted heroes. Pueri inuptaeque puellae is boys and unmarried girls. So there's quite a lot, even if you look at juvenes, young men, and parentum, parents, that you already know from the language paper in terms of vocab for the 5-mark translation. Let's have a little look then at the effects you need for 8 and 10 markers. Let's look at the effects. We've got emphatic positioning on hinc via to really put the audience in medias res, so in the thick of it, looking at the landscape of the underworld. We've got assonance as well in vastaque voragine, because remember that would be a soft kind of W or U sound to connect ideas together. So assonance and alliteration aren't always about pace. Sometimes it can be about connecting ideas, and that is the vast whirlpools. We've got enjambement in aistuat, so the main verb is pushed to the beginning of the next line. There are quite a few caesura as well to create dramatic pauses in the description of Charon. So the terrible squalor of Charon, big dramatic pause, whose beard was never trimmed. His eyes were flames, stant lumina flamma, to give those pregnant pauses. We have metonymy in lumina flamma, so his eyes were flames, and actually the word for eyes is completely replaced by lumina, so don't get caught out by that in a translation question. We also have the semantic field of decay, so we have sordidus, squalore, and we could probably add terrible, terribili and horrendous to that to create a very kind of foreboding figure in Charon as well. We also have polyptoton in senior, old age, and senectus. Senior, old man, and senectus, old age, which emphasises this kind of rickety figure, almost like the way we imagine death. And we have syndetic listing, which builds a little bit of pace but also emphasises the different types of people and the abundance of people in the underworld. And this is possibly the way that Virgil's audience would imagine death after the civil wars in Rome, so the abundance of dead. Matres atque viri defunctaque corpora vitae. As many are the leaves that fall in the forest at the first chill of autumn, as many the birds that flock to the land from deep ocean when the cold season of the year drives them over the sea to lands bathed in sun. There they stood begging to be allowed to be the first to cross, and stretching out their arms and longing for the further shore. But the grim boatman takes some here and some there, and others he pushes far back from the sandy shore. So you've got two similes here that we'll talk about more in effects, quam and quam. Quam multa, quam multae. Aves is the birds at 311. Autumni frigore, like the first cold of autumn. Silvis in the top line is forests. So these are words you know from the language paper. Transpontum, across the sea. And we've got the present participles orantes to make you feel like you're part of the action. Ripai is riverbank, amore with love. So plenty of vocab you know. If we look at the effects, you can see we've got seasonal similes. So it's about the quantity of the dead and the way they move, the way they swirl around like ghosts. But also, qua multa in silvis autumni frigore, the idea of like the first chill of autumn, presents death as part of a natural life cycle. And although it's quite bleak, that's what these two similes have in common. In a 10-mark essay, you could contrast these similes to one we're going to see in a later video on bees in the Elysian fields, when the souls of the dead in the part of the underworld Anchises is in are compared to bees around a hive, which is a more positive springtime image. So we've got this difference in similes that change the mood of the underworld as you read ahead. For a 10-marker, that'd be a really good thing to bring up. We have within this passage enjambement again, the sense falls over the line, and lapsa cadunt folia reflects the content. So these three words fall over the line, but they're actually reflecting the falling of leaves, which is quite kind of clever. We have caesura again, so if you're ever in doubt, you can pick out a caesura for a dramatic pause. We have the emphatic positioning of stabanth. They stood right at the beginning of the line, when quite often, naturally in Latin, the verb would fall at the very end. We have the repetition in the end, nunc hos, nunc accipit illos, now some, now others, ast alios, and others still. So we have a tricolon crescens, we have hos these, illos those, and alios others, and it's determining the souls of the dead almost at random. So there's plenty of vocabulary you know across these passages, and there's plenty of imagery that you could pick out. If you were looking at an 8-marker, there's loads of effects, but you could also draw on this for a 10-mark question. I really like the question, I think, would be like the positive versus negative aspects of the underworld, because later on we have the promise of Rome when we look at the Anchises video, and here we have the bleakness of Charon, and there's a shift between the two. That to me seems like a very obvious 10-mark question that OCR would bring up. But there's also plenty on natural imagery and things like that that you could use. I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to work on putting the others up really quickly because I know that the exam is looming for 2023. Best of luck with your revision. Thanks.